What starts as a nightmare becomes something far more complicated when Emma discovers that Sebastian might be her only protection from forces more dangerous than she ever imagined. But in a world where trust is a luxury neither can afford, will their growing connections save them both, or destroy everything they've fought to protect? Hey there, romance lovers. Tonight we dive into a world where every choice has a cost and every moment matters. Shall we step into it? The crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across Emma Rose's trembling hands as she stood on the auction stage. The black evening gown Helena had provided felt like a funeral shroud against her skin. Below, shadows and expensive suits held numbered paddles like weapons, her faces obscured by the harsh stage lights that made her feel naked despite being fully clothed. Ladies and gentlemen, our next offering is Miss Emma Rose. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the marble hall. 24 years old, fine arts background, intelligent, and absolutely exquisite. Emma's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the charity event Helena had promised. Prestigious cross-gallery owner had lied, manipulated, sold her like a piece of art from her own collection. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Let's start the bidding at $10,000. Paddles rose like predatory fins breaking the surface of dark water. Emma tried to speak, to scream that this was wrong, but her voice had abandoned her.
Oh.
The numbers climbed with ruthless efficiency. 20,000, 50,000. Each bid was a chain being forged around her freedom. The room smelled of expensive cologne and Cuban cigars, of power and corruption dressed in designer suits. Emma's legs threatened to give out as she watched wealthy men and women casually beside her. Fate, with the flick of their wrists. 100,000, called a voice from the shadows. Emma squinted into the audience, desperate to see the faces that belonged to these disembodied voices. The stage lights blinded her, turning the bidders into ghostly silhouettes. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the price continued to soar beyond anything she could comprehend. 200,000, 250, 300. The auctioneer's practiced rhythm never faltered, each number falling like a judge's gavel. Emma felt herself becoming smaller with every bid, reduced to nothing more than a commodity to be bought and sold. Then, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk, a voice spoke from the back of the room with quiet, absolute authority. 500,000. The entire auction house fell silent. Even the auctioneer's confident demeanor wavered for a moment. Emma strained to see who had just bid $500,000 on her life, but all she could make out was a tall figure, in the shadows perfectly still while everyone else shifted nervously. 500,000 going once, the auctioneer recovered, his voice slightly breathless, going twice. No other paddles rose. The silence stretched like a held breath, heavy with anticipation and fear. Sold to bidder number 43. Emma's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the polished stage as applause erupted around her, the sound echoing off the marble walls like thunder. Strong hands helped her to her feet, but she couldn't feel them. She couldn't feel anything except the crushing weight of what had just happened. As she was guided off the stage on unsteady legs, Emma caught her first glimpse of the man who had purchased her. He moved through the crowd with predatory grace, tall and imposing in a perfectly tailored black suit. His dark hair was styled with military precision, and when he looked at her, she saw eyes the color of winter storm's cold, calculating and completely focused on her. He approached with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. "Miss Rose," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. He extended his hand with casual authority. "I'm Sebastian Cain. I believe we have some arrangements to discuss." Emma stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would seal whatever fate Helena had sold her into. Security guards flanked the exits. There was nowhere to run, no one coming to save her. With her heart pounding loud enough to drown out the lingering applause, she placed her trembling fingers in his palm. Sebastian's grip was firm, warm, and inescapable. As he led her away from the auction stage, Emma realized that her quiet, simple life was over. She was now the property of Sebastian Cain, purchased like one of the paintings from the very gallery where she had once felt safe. The trap had been set perfectly, and she had walked right into it. Sebastian's car was a fortress of black leather and polished mahogany, the privacy screen sealing them off from the outside world. Emma pressed herself against the far door, as far from him as the confined space would allow. The city lights streamed past the tinted windows like falling stars, each one carrying her further from the life she knew. "You're afraid, Sebastian," observed, pouring himself a scotch from the car's built-in bar. His movements were precise, controlled. Everything about him spoke of a man who had never met a situation he couldn't dominate. "That's understandable." Emma found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "I didn't agree to this. Helena entered me without my permission. This is kidnapping." Sebastian's laugh was low and humorless. "Actually, it's not. Your employer had certain contractual rights regarding promotional activities. You signed those papers when you started at the gallery 3 years ago. I never signed anything that said I could be auctioned off like cattle. Read the fine print." He took a sip of his drink, studying her over the rim of the crystal glass. Section 12, subsection 4, emergency representation clauses. Your Miss Cross was very thorough. The car pulled through wrought iron gates into a private estate. Emma's breath caught as they approached a mansion that looked like it had been carved from shadows and moonlight. Gothic spires reached toward the star-filled sky, and warm light spilled from tall windows, creating an almost romantic atmosphere that felt deeply wrong given the circumstances. "Welcome home," Sebastian said as the car stopped. "This isn't my home, it is now." A staff of silent servants appeared as if from nowhere, but Sebastian dismissed them with a subtle gesture. He helped Emma from the car himself, his hand on her elbow both protective and possessive. The night air was crisped with the scent of jasmine and secrets. Inside, the mansion was a study in controlled opulence. Dark wood paneling, oil paintings that probably cost more than Emma's education, and a grand staircase that curved upward like a spine. Everything was beautiful and cold, much like its owner. "Mrs. Holloway will show you to your room," Sebastian said, nodding to an older woman who had appeared with ghost-like efficiency. "You'll find everything you need there." "What about what I want?" Emma's fear was finally giving way to anger. "What about my choice in any of this?" Sebastian paused at the foot of the staircase, his hand resting on the carved banister. He turned to look at her. Something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. Something that might have been regret. "Choice is a luxury, Miss Rose, one that few of us can afford." His voice was softer now, almost gentle. "But I promise you this, you'll be safe here, safer than you've ever been." "Safe from what?" "From the people who would have bought you if I hadn't." The weight of his words settled over Emma like a shroud. She followed Mrs. Holloway up the staircase, her heels echoing on the marble steps. The room she was given was larger than her entire apartment had been, decorated in shades of cream and gold with a 4-poster bed that looked like something from a fairy tale. But fairy tales were for children. And Emma was learning that the real world was far more dangerous than any story. She tried the door after Mrs. Holloway left. It wasn't locked, which surprised her. The windows weren't barred either, though they overlooked a sheer drop to the gardens below. This wasn't a prison cell, but it was still a cage. Emma sank onto the edge of the bed, still wearing the black evening gown that had become her uniform of captivity. How she thought about Helena's bright smile, the way her mentor had insisted this opportunity would change everything. She'd been right, just not in the way Emma had imagined. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Sebastian entered without waiting for permission, carrying a tray with tea and sandwiches. He'd changed from his tuxedo into dark slacks, and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, making him look younger and somehow more dangerous. "You should eat," he said, setting the tray on a small table by the window. "It's been a long night. I'm not hungry." "You will be." He poured tea from a delicate china pot, the domesticity of the act jarring in the surreal circumstances. "Cream. Sugar. I want to go home." Sebastian's hand stilled on the teapot handle. "Your apartment was cleaned out this morning. Your belongings are being delivered here tomorrow." The casual way he said it, as if he were discussing the weather, made Emma's blood turn to ice. "You can't just erase my life." "I didn't erase it. I bought it." He handed her the teacup, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. $500,000 to be precise. Emma stared at the tea, fighting the urge to throw it in his face. What happens now? What do you want from me? Sebastian was quiet for so long that Emma wondered if he'd heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a wariness that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. What I want and what I need are two very different things, Miss Rose. He moved to the window, looking out at the grounds below. What I need is for you to trust me, even though you have no reason to. Oh, what? I want us to keep you alive. Alive? Emma set down the teacup with trembling hands. Who's trying to kill me? Sebastian turned back to her, and in the lamplight, she could see scars along his jawline that she hadn't noticed before. Whatever had marked him had been violent and recent. The same people who killed the last 3 girls from that auction, he said quietly. Emma's world tilted. What? Helena Cross doesn't just run an art gallery, Miss Rose. She runs a very specialized procurement service for very dangerous people. And you were never supposed to survive past tomorrow night. The teacup slipped from Emma's nerveless fingers. Shattering on the marble floor like her last illusion of safety, Emma's hands shook as she knelt to pick up the shattered porcelain, each piece cutting deeper than the last. You're lying. Sebastian crouched beside her, his fingers intercepting hers as she reached for a particularly sharp fragment. I wish I were. He took the pieces from her hands, his touch surprisingly gentle. Sarah Martinez auctioned 3 months ago, found in the Chicago River 2 weeks later. Jessica Chen auctioned 6 months ago. Overdose in a hotel room, except she'd never touched drugs in her life. Emma pulled her hands away, wrapping them around herself, as if she could hold the pieces of her shattered world together through sheer force of will. Why should I believe you? Because you're still alive. Sebastian stood, disposing of the broken china in a wastebasket with clinical efficiency. Because I paid $500,000 to keep you that way. The room felt smaller suddenly, the elegant furnishings pressing in around her. Emma rose on unsteady legs, pacing to the window where moonlight painted the garden silver and black. Why? Why would you save someone you don't even know? Sebastian's reflection appeared in the glass beside hers, his face carved in shadow, in moonlight. Because I know what it's like to be sold. Emma turned to study his profile, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. What happened to you? I was 16 when my father's debts caught up with him. Sebastian's voice was steady, but Emma heard the cracks beneath the surface. Russian mob.
Oh.
They took me as collateral, sold me to the highest bidder to settle. His accounts, the casual way he said it, made Emma's stomach turn. Sebastian. I spent 3 years learning that money can buy anything, including people, including silence, including death. He moved away from the window, his footsteps muffled by the Persian rug. I escaped when I was 19, built my empire from nothing, because nothing was all I had left. Emma saw him differently now, the expensive clothes and controlled demeanor taking on new meaning. Not the armor of privilege, but the carefully constructed fortress of someone who had learned never to show weakness. The scars on your face, she said softly, reminders of what happens when you trust the wrong people. Sebastian's hand moved, unconsciously to his jaw. I've spent the last 10 years tracking down everyone involved in that network. Helena Cross was one of the last names on my list. So you came to the auction to find her? Came to the auction to destroy her. Finding you there was unexpected. Emma felt something shift inside her chest, a dangerous warmth spreading through. Her fear. You could have just let her keep running the operation, stayed out of it, could I? Sebastian turned to face her fully, and Emma saw something raw and vulnerable in his expression. When I saw you on that stage, terrified and betrayed, I saw myself at 16. I saw every person who was sold before you and after you, and I realized that all the money and power in the world means nothing if you use it only for revenge. The space between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Emma took a step closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. What happens now? To Helena? To the operation? Helena will be dealt with. The auction house will be shut down. We'll face consequences. Sebastian's voice hardened. But that's not what you're really asking. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. What am I asking? You want to know what happens to us? The word us hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. Emma found herself studying the way the lamplight caught the silver threads in Sebastian's dark hair, the way his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders, the careful distance he maintained, even as his eyes burned with something that looked like longing. "I don't even know you," she whispered. "You know, I paid $500,000 to keep you safe.
Wow.
You know, I've killed for less noble reasons. Not that everything I've told you tonight could destroy me if it reached the wrong ears." Sebastian took a step closer, closing the distance between them to mere inches. "What else do you need to know?" Emma could smell his cologne now, something dark and complex like the man himself. "I need to know if you're going to keep me here." "Against my will? No." The answer came without hesitation. "Tomorrow morning, Mrs. Holloway will provide you with new identification, bank account with enough money to disappear anywhere in the world, and a car to take you wherever you want to go." Relief and something that felt disturbingly like disappointment warred in Emma's chest. Just like that. Just like that. Sebastian's eyes searched her face, as if memorizing every detail. "Unless you choose to stay," proposition hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. Emma thought about her empty apartment, her betrayal by Helena, the simple life that had been stripped away from her like paint from a canvas. "Why would I stay?" Sebastian's smile was bitter and beautiful. "Because running won't change what happened to you tonight? Because Helena Cross has connections that reach further than you know? Because the kind of people who frequent those auctions don't forget faces." He paused, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And because I think you're as tired of being alone as I am." Emma's breath caught. In all the terror and confusion of the night, she hadn't expected honesty. The admission hung between them, raw and vulnerable. And Emma realized that Sebastian Cain, for all his power and control, was just as damaged as she was. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed from where she'd left it on the nightstand. The screen lit up with Helena's smiling face. The name that had once represented mentorship and opportunity now making Emma's skin crawl. Sebastian's expression darkened as he read the caller ID. "Don't answer it." But Emma was already reaching for the phone, something cold and furious unfurling in her chest. She needed to hear Helena's voice to confront the woman who had sold her like a piece of art. "Emma, darling." Helena's voice was bright and cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "How is the event? I hope you made some wonderful connections." Emma met Sebastian's eyes, seeing her own anger reflected there. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the rage burning in her throat. "I know what you did, Helena." The silence on the other end of the line was long enough to hear Emma's own heartbeat. "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, dear." But Helena's voice had changed, losing its warmth like a snake shedding its skin. "The auction, the buyers, the girls who died." Emma's grip tightened on the phone. "I know everything." Helena's laugh was sharp and cold. "Oh, my sweet, naive little Emma. You don't know anything at all." The line went dead, leaving Emma staring at the blank screen with growing horror. Sebastian was beside her in an instant, taking the phone from her trembling hands. "She's coming," Emma whispered. "Isn't she?" Sebastian's jaw tightened as he looked at the phone.
Oh.
"They're all coming." The attack came at dawn. Emma woke to the sound of gunfire and shattering glass. Sebastian was already moving, pulling on a bulletproof vest as he shouted orders to his security team through a handheld radio. The elegant mansion had transformed into a war zone in the span of heartbeats. "Stay down," Sebastian commanded, pressing a gun into Emma's hands. The weight of it felt foreign and terrible. "Don't hesitate to use it." "I can't. You can." His eyes were fierce, desperate. "You will? Because if they get past me, you're dead." Emma's training at the gallery had never prepared her for this. The sound of combat boots on marble floors, the acrid smell of gunpowder, the way Sebastian moved through it all like a predator who had finally found his natural habitat. She pressed herself against the bedroom wall, clutching the gun with white knuckles as the battle raged below. Through the broken windows, she could see muzzle flashes in the pre-dawn darkness. Shadows moving with deadly purpose through Sebastian's carefully manicured gardens. A scream echoed from somewhere in the house. Emma's stomach clenched, not knowing if it belonged to friend or enemy. The bedroom door exploded inward. Emma raised the gun with trembling hands, finger on the trigger. But the figure in the doorway made her blood freeze. Mrs. Holloway stood there, her gray hair perfectly styled. Despite the chaos, her kind eyes now cold as winter steel. In her hand was a pistol that looked as comfortable there as a teacup had the night before. "Hello, dear." The housekeeper's voice was exactly the same, warm and maternal, which made the betrayal cut deeper than any blade. "I'm so sorry, it's come to this." Emma's gun wavered. "You're working for them." "I've been working for Helena Cross for 15 years. Mrs. Holloway stepped into the room, her weapon never wavering from Emma's chest. Long before Sebastian ever bought this house, long before he started his righteous crusade, the pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Sebastian's security, his plans, his movements, all of it reported back to Helena through the woman who served him tea and managed his household. The other girls, Emma whispered, were unfortunate casualties of a necessary business. Mrs. Holloway's expression remained pleasantly neutral, as if discussing the weather. "You, however, present a unique problem." Sebastian's grown attached. "To you, that makes him vulnerable." "Where is he?" Mrs. Holloway smiled, and it was the same kind smile she'd worn when bringing Emma dinner. "Fighting for his life in the library last I checked. He's very good at violence, our Sebastian. He can't fight what he can't see coming." A new sound reached Emma's ears, Sebastian's voice, raw with pain and rage. The gunfire below had stopped, replaced by something worse. Silence. "Put down the gun, dear." Mrs. Holloway took another step forward. "I promise to make it quick." "What Helena has planned for Sebastian?" Emma's finger tightened on the trigger. No. Mrs. Holloway looked genuinely surprised. "My dear girl, you held a paintbrush yesterday. I've been killing people since before you were born, and you should know better than to underestimate someone with nothing left to lose." Emma pulled the trigger. The recoil knocked her backward, her ears ringing from the gunshot. Mrs. Holloway staggered, clutching her shoulder, her weapon clattering to the floor. The kind mask had finally slipped, revealing something vicious underneath. "Little bitch," the housekeeper snarled, lunging for her fallen gun. Emma dove for the bedroom door, her bare feet slipping on the polished marble as she ran toward the sound of Sebastian's voice. The mansion she had thought was a prison had become her sanctuary, and now even that was being torn away. She found him in the library, bleeding from a gash across his forehead, standing over to bodies in tactical gear. His shirt was torn and stained with blood, whether his or theirs, Emma couldn't tell. "Emma," he spun toward her, relief flooding his features. "I told you to stay hidden. Mrs. Holloway's one of them. She's been working for Helena." Sebastian's expression hardened. "Of course she has. I've been so focused on external threats that I never considered." A slow clap interrupted him. Helena cross-stepped through the library's French doors, flanked by armed men. She looked exactly as she had in the gallery, perfectly styled, expensively dressed, radiating confidence and control. "Really, Sebastian?" Helena said, her voice carrying the same condescending tone she'd once used to correct Emma's cataloging. "Errors? Did you think you could dismantle years of careful work without consequences?" Sebastian moved to shield Emma, his own weapon trained on Helena. "It's over. The auction house is finished. The buyers are exposed. One auction house. One set of buyers." Helena's smile was sharp as broken glass. "You've barely scratched the surface of what we've built. And now, thanks to your dramatic rescue of my little protege here, you've provided us with the perfect leverage." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean, my dear Emma, that Sebastian's feelings for you make him predictable, controllable." Helena gestured to her men, who raised their weapons. "He'll do anything to keep you safe, including walking away from his vendetta against us." "No." The word tore from Sebastian's throat like a physical wound. "I won't let you continue. Then she dies." Helena's voice was matter-of-fact, businesslike. "Right here, right now. And you get to live with the knowledge that your pride cost her everything." Emma watched Sebastian's face, saw the war between his mission and his heart playing out in those storm-gray eyes. She thought about the 16-year-old boy who had been sold and broken, who had spent years building himself into something strong enough to tear down the system that had destroyed him. She thought about the girls who had died, who would continue to die if Helena's network survived. She thought about choice and how rare it truly was. "Sebastian," Emma said softly, and when he looked at her, she smiled. "Some things are worth more than safety." Before anyone could react, Emma lunged for Helena's gun. The world exploded into chow-shouts, gunfire, the sound of struggle. Emma felt the weapon's weight in her hands for a split second before Helena's. Men opened fire. Pain bloomed across Emma's chest like a spreading stain. She fell to her knees on the Persian rug, watching her blood seep into the intricate patterns. Sebastian's roar of rage and grief was the last thing she heard before darkness claimed her. Emma drifted in and out of consciousness to the sound of machines beeping and Sebastian's voice. Rough with exhaustion and unshed tears, "The surgeons say you'll live," he was saying, his fingers intertwined with hers. 3 weeks in the ICU, but you'll live." She tried to speak, her throat raw from the breathing tube they'd only recently removed. "Helena." Sebastian's grip tightened on her hand. Dead, along with her entire network. Every buyer, every facilitator, every person who touched that auction house. His voice carried a darkness that made Emma shiver. "I kept my promise, Emma. All of them." Emma struggled to sit up, wincing at the pull of stitches across her chest. The hospital room was filled with flowers, orchids, roses, arrangements that must have cost more than her old monthly salary. But Sebastian looked terrible, his face gaunt with worry, his clothes wrinkled from days spent at her bedside. "How long was I out?" 21 days. Sebastian's voice cracked. 21 days where I wasn't sure if you'd wake up, if you'd remember me, if you'd forgive me for dragging you into this." Emma studied his face, seeing the guilt and fear written in every line. "Sebastian, I should have protected you better. I should have seen Mrs. Holloway's betrayal coming. Should have kept you safe instead of letting my feelings cloud my judgment." He released her hand, standing to pace to the window. "You nearly died because I cared more about having you near me than keeping you out of danger. Look at me." When he didn't turn around, Emma's voice sharpened with the authority she'd never known she possessed. "Sebastian, look at me." He turned, and Emma saw her own emotions reflected in his storm-gray eyes, love and fear, and the terrible vulnerability that came with caring for someone in a world that used feelings as weapons. "I chose to grab that gun," she said firmly. "I chose to fight instead of running. I chose to stand with you instead of letting Helena use me as leverage." Emma pushed herself higher in the hospital bed, ignoring the protest of healing wounds. "You don't get to take that choice away from me by blaming yourself." Sebastian moved back to her bedside, his hand hovering over hers, as if afraid to touch her. "You could have died, but I didn't. And because I didn't, Helena's network is finished. No more girls will be sold. No more families will be destroyed." Emma caught his hand, pulling it to rest against her cheek. That was worth the risk. Sebastian's control finally broke. He sank into the chair beside her bed, his forehead dropping to rest against their joined hands. "I've never been so terrified in my life. When I saw you fall, when I saw your blood." "Hey," Emma's free hand found his hair, fingers combing through the dark strands. "I'm okay. We're okay." Sebastian lifted his head, and Emma saw tears tracking down his cheeks. She'd never seen him cry before, had never imagined that Sebastian Cain was capable of such raw emotion. "I love you," he whispered, the words falling between them like a confession and a plea. "I know it's too soon. I know the circumstances are impossible, but Emma, I love you." Emma felt her own tears starting, her heart full to bursting with. Everything she'd never expected to feel for the man who had bought her freedom with his own pain. "I love you too," she whispered back, and watched wonder replace the fear in his eyes. Sebastian leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers with desperate tenderness. The kiss tasted like salt tears and new beginnings, like promises that neither of them had ever dared to make before when they broke apart. Emma rested her forehead against his. What happens now? Sebastian's smile was soft and real, the first genuine expression of happiness she'd seen from him. Now we heal, both of us. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. And then we build something beautiful from all the broken pieces. Emma thought about the gallery where she'd once felt safe, about the mentor who had betrayed her, about the life that had been stripped away in a single night. Then she looked at Sebastian, at the man who had saved her and been saved by her in return, and realized that sometimes the most beautiful art came from the most damaged materials. Sebastian, when I get out of here, I want to see your house again. Our house. Emma smiled at the way his eyes lit up at the word our. I want to fill it with paintings and laughter and all the things that make a place feel like home instead of a fortress. Sebastian brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. I'd like that very much. 6 months later, Emma stood in the main gallery of the Cain Foundation, watching children from local shelters explore art exhibits designed to heal trauma through creativity. Sebastian's mansion had been converted into a sanctuary for survivors, its cold marble halls now echoing with hope instead of secrets. Emma had never displayed her own art in Helena's pristine gallery, but here her paintings lined the walls, bold, honest depictions of darkness and light, of pain transformed into beauty. Sebastian stood beside her, his arm around her waist, both of them scarred but whole. No regrets? He asked softly. Emma leaned into his warmth, watching a young girl who couldn't have been more than 16 discover joy in mixing colors on a canvas. Only one, Emma said. Sebastian tensed beside her. What? Emma turned in his arms, smiling at the concern in his beautiful eyes. I regret that it took being sold at an auction to find you. Sebastian's laughter was rich and warm, filling the gallery like music. He spun her around, careful of her still healing wounds, before setting her down and cupping her face in his hands. Then maybe, he said, his voice soft with wonder, we should be grateful for the darkness that led us to each other. Emma rose on her toes to kiss him, awed by art and hope and the sound of children, discovering that beauty could emerge from the most broken places. In the end, she had been sold at an auction and bought by a billionaire who refused to let her go. But what Helena Cross had never understood, what none of them had understood, was that love couldn't be purchased or possessed. It could only be freely given, freely received, and cherished like the rarest work of art. As Emma pulled back from Sebastian's kiss, she saw their future stretched out before them, not perfect but real, not without scars, but beautiful because of them. And for the first time since that terrible night in the auction house, Emma Rose felt truly free. The end.